Oh my goodness guys, this month's chapter of Dragon Ball Super has been a very long awaited and incredibly controversial one that has a lot of people talking for a number of reasons. With the previous chapter, the confrontation between Granola and Vegeta had only just begun. And at that time, Vegeta would begin by speaking to the guy, making it clear that he was no longer affiliated with Frieza and that he was just a child when the planet Cereal was invaded. But with Granola being unfazed by these words, the fight would begin as Vegeta would immediately assume his Super Saiyan Blue form. From here, using Hakai on a number of boulders surrounding Granola to no avail, as Granola would in turn do the very same with a far larger one. The fight was very clearly in Granola's favor as he effortlessly evaded many of Vegeta's attacks and continued to pressure him. And at a point, Vegeta would actually admit that Granola, for the moment at least, was stronger than he was, but even still, in the end, was confident that victory would be his, a conclusion Granola himself failed to comprehend, prompting him to question if Vegeta's overinflated ego was to blame for such a sad deviance from reality. Meanwhile, Goku had finally woken back up from his previous fight with Granola, however, he was still severely injured from the blow he had sustained. And again, Vegeta was still in the loser's seat, but was clearly becoming more and more of an annoyance to Granola, even managing to goad him into accidentally causing the further destruction of his former home. And at that, Vegeta would conclude and convey that Granola is not yet used to his newfound power, as he is seriously lacking in battle experience comparatively. And from there, Granola was still in the lead, but the tide was indeed shifting, slowly but surely. And as the fight raged on, Vegeta only continued to become stronger and stronger, and in recognizing this, Granola sought to finish him off and delivered a major blow to a vital point of Vegeta's, which was barely held back. Yet even still, the damage was severe, but strangely enough, Vegeta was clearly enjoying himself here. Rather than having to be a hero in this fight, he was simply able to be a battle-crazed warrior just as his genetics intended. And suddenly, a wellspring of unsettling godly ki would exude from his body, from which he would emerge a changed man. This was a brand new transformation we had never seen before, an unbounded instinctual power he had unlocked thanks to his training with the god of destruction, Beerus. And we would pick up right from there with this latest chapter as Vegeta would unfurl his arms and release this ominous power in the direction of a clearly disturbed Granola. It would take him a second, but he would actually manage to disperse the power before him just as the presence of Vegeta would suddenly take its place. Now gripping tightly onto Granola's scarf and looking him right in the face, Vegeta would say that Granola's gotten a bit too full of himself and fully intended to knock him down a peg or two. And Granola was shook as Vegeta continued to taunt him just before headbutting him and then throwing him. Granola would skid, but then attempt to catch himself just as Vegeta would emerge from behind and spike him downwards. Granola was just getting knocked around back and forth at this point. Now frustrated by this dramatic shift, Granola would stop recoiling and attempt to get back on the offensive as he aimed downwards. But his target was nowhere to be found, as yet again Vegeta would get him with the very same trick from above, this time kneeing him in the back and causing him to plummet down. But to this, Granola's anger was enough to springboard him back in a flash, but interestingly enough, it would seem that Vegeta fully anticipated this, as he'd have a massive smile across his face and did not even move elsewhere despite this. And so Granola would slam right into his stomach, what would have previously been a very terrible blow to suffer. However, Vegeta would look at Granola and pretty much tell him the more thrilling the battle, the more powerful he becomes. And at this point, Vegeta was looking downright deranged as suddenly he would just grip onto the sides of Granola's head, dragging him by it as he shifted his momentum and again, being the oh so disrespectful man that he is, saw the ruins of this man's former home and threw him down into it. It took Granola a bit of time to recover from this, but just as he began to get back on his feet, Vegeta would rush in and kick him right in the stomach through a wall as Granola would just crash through building after building. Vegeta was having a whole lot of fun at this point, and at the same time Granola was somewhat hiding amidst the rubble, attempting to gather himself. He would speak of how Vegeta was like a totally different person suddenly. The notion of becoming stronger due to damage was perplexing, and additionally, he had no idea what a god of destruction was, seemingly attempting to speak to Oatmeal, but he would actually end up being responded to by Vegeta, who was suddenly behind him. He would say that gods of destructions are beings and that their universe has one. So not much of a telling answer there, but it is something indeed. He'd also say that this god of destruction was also the one to teach him about this power. To this, Granola, who had been caught off guard, would immediately jump back, creating a bit of distance between the two of them. He would then attempt to confirm that it was this god who had granted him this power, pretty much attributing a similar situation to his own as to validate himself being pushed despite his own wish. But Vegeta would retort that that was not what he said, as it was actually quite the contrary. This power was his own, that their battle here had awakened it, this innate power within himself, which I find to be very interesting. Vegeta has recently been speaking about his Saiyan blood and such a whole lot, or at least more than the norm, and so it would seem that this form takes Saiyan power, or Zenkai, and pushes it to the next level. And because of this, Vegeta would express his gratitude, as a now angered Granola would refute the possibility of Vegeta being more powerful than him, as he would release a ki blast at him. But rather than evading, Vegeta would only prepare himself for the attack and remain completely still as it hit him directly, as yet again, he would commend Granola for his efforts. And man, with this form, Vegeta is pretty much like a masochist begging to be brutalized. Granola would then commence a barrage of several such blasts, which were clearly hurting Vegeta, but he took them all like a champ regardless. And Granola would not let up, as he would just keep blasting and blasting, as suddenly emerging from the smoke, it was Vegeta, as Granola was for a moment there terrified of the blow he was on the verge of suffering, as he would suddenly call out for a shield in panic, which would protect him from the hit, upsetting Vegeta. Granola would then question why exactly Vegeta didn't dodge at all, then confirming that this wasn't like Goku's power-up, which allowed his body to avoid danger, of course referring to Ultra Instinct. And listen, Granola was not letting go of that shield at all, he was absolutely terrified here. And Vegeta would then tell him not to compare Goku's pathetic technique to his own, as Goku's body may have a mind of its own, but this was all him, as we would finally receive a name to go with this transformation. This was Ultra Ego. I am really curious what you guys think about this name. We've seen a bit of debate over on Twitter, but personally, I like it a whole lot. It's very fitting for the character, and it's phonetically similar to the term alter ego, which makes it flow pretty well, so I am a fan. If nothing else, it is way better than what the leaked translations were presenting. But after making this clear, Vegeta would assume a running stance and soon rush towards Granola, then kicking with both feet in the air as he actually managed to breach Granola's defenses and kick him right in the face with both feet firmly planted, again demolishing more of these ruins. But just then, Granola's old friend, the elderly Namekian Monaito, would emerge and question who exactly Granola might be fighting, with the possibility of it being Frieza in mind. Now, I for one am really looking forward to Goku and Vegeta possibly interacting with this guy, as their knowledge of his remaining kin in Universe 7 could very well prove their innocence and add to Granola's conflict. That and the idea of him being reunited with his people, albeit a bit estranged, does sound like a pretty nice thing. But getting back to the battle, at this point Granola was holding onto the side of his face, yelling out that he refused to lose to some third-rate Saiyan goon, as Frieza was to be his ultimate target, which would cause Vegeta to speak to him once more, now explaining that Planet Vegeta was not taken out by a meteor, but rather by Frieza himself, that their tribe was yet another pushed to the brink of extinction by Frieza, just as his had been. And to this, Granola would request confirmation from Oatmeal, who would then say that this information did not line up with what he had been told. But anyways, as he got back on his feet, he would express that it made no difference, as he still intended to see his revenge against the Saiyans through to completion, as he would pull back a fist and Vegeta would headbutt it. Blood would drip from this location, as he would tell Granola to believe what he will, as regardless, he was telling the truth. But not for any sort of pity, as yet again he would kick Granola to infinity and beyond, as Granola would use his scarf to grapple onto a nearby tower in retort. But now on top of it, Oatmeal would speak to him again, now saying that the Saiyans might just be victims like him, which Granola would again dismiss, as either way, the Saiyans killed his people. And to that, Oatmeal would say that it didn't seem like either of the two were aware of that at all, which really pissed Granola off, as he would remove his eye covering and discard his ever so faithful AI companion, then proclaiming that now that he is the strongest, he had no need for their support any longer. And so very clearly Granola is in denial, and reasonably so. With revenge having been the only thing on his mind for oh so long, it must be incredibly difficult to let go of it. To lose that drive and target for his aggression is to discard all that he had been doing for so long, to discard the sacrifice of his lifespan in exchange for this power. And so with all this, a new degree of seriousness had now come over him. He would approach Vegeta now as his red eye would be noticed. He would bring up the fact that Vegeta claimed he was not yet used to his power, to which Vegeta would again confirm. And so Granola decided that he would have to make up for that lack of experience by fighting Vegeta, as to better prepare himself for taking on Frieza. As he would express that Vegeta was not the only one who gets stronger the more he fights, as he would telekinetically lift the entire tower he was just standing on and throw it down towards Vegeta, who would catch it with one hand and completely demolish it. Now questioning the fact that suddenly Granola had no problem destroying this ruined city. And to that, I'd say that Granola is at the point of being so upset that he does not even really know what he is upset about, as he would lift the rubble created and use destruction on each individual piece. Vegeta would guard against this with his armor now broken apart, and then would take it off and throw it elsewhere, which is actually worth taking note of because within his armor was their very last senzu bean, as one of the two had already been consumed by Goku, but regardless, Vegeta was ready to go all out. Meanwhile, a discarded oatmeal would command Granola's ship and have it pick them up and fly elsewhere. But back to the fight, these two were going blow for blow back and forth, and Vegeta was really hurting here, but was loving every moment of it, as he could very well stand to become even stronger, as suddenly a ki blast would be shot from below, which Vegeta would narrowly dodge. And the sheer fact that he felt the need to dodge this was to be taken note of, which made Granola question if Vegeta was hitting his limit here, as Vegeta with a smile would say that it was unwise to doubt a Saiyan's combative capabilities as they live for battle. As elsewhere, we would again have Goku, who was splashing some water on his face as the two fought. And from what he could tell, the quote-unquote oomph Vegeta had a bit ago was waning. He could tell that Granola's moves were getting sharper and sharper, which is to say that he was likely getting the hang of fighting. And with this in mind, Goku felt like he could not afford to be taking it easy on the sidelines for much longer, as he would begin to channel a bit of energy in his hand, speaking of his body healing up. Now this is very interesting. We know that Goku is a genius when it comes to emulating techniques for the most part, and so perhaps he is mimicking the healing capabilities of Dende, who had managed to heal the impalement move he'd suffered at the hands of Moro in the Moro arc. This could also be an aspect of Ultra Instinct we have yet to observe, as defensively, it has been able to concentrate itself for protection. Either way, I'm just very curious what he's got going on here. Past this, however, Vegeta was taking on blast after blast directly, as he would then respond with a blast of his own on Granola. And now clearly exhausted for a moment there, Vegeta began to border unconsciousness, but would then shake himself awake. His vision was blurring, and he'd lost a lot of blood. He'd also taken far too much damage. Meanwhile, Granola was standing there with his shot aimed. Things were looking pretty desperate now, as Vegeta would then go to end things as he would charge up a massive ball of energy overhead. He would proclaim that this would destroy anything it comes in contact with, then saying that if Granola wants to protect his planet, that he'd better stop it. And oh my lord, was this downright crazy. I mean, Vegeta knows there to be inhabitants of this world, and it's not like he is a villain anymore, so this move is very interesting. I'd even go as far as to say that he wanted Granola to stop him here. Again, the whole theme behind this transformation is that of being pushed to the brink, so in theory, the more desperate the situation, the better. And beyond that, is this not the most God of Destruction statement you have ever heard of? Like seriously, this attack and sentiment are damn near identical to the ultimatum Beerus gave to Goku at the end of Battle of Gods. Granola would not flinch, however, as Vegeta would commend his bravery and let loose the ball of destruction. And as it approached, a change would occur in Granola as well, as his left eye too would suddenly go red like the other, much to Vegeta's shock, as he would then lift up both hands and fire twin shots in the center of the orb. From here, the blast would implode and condense before erupting into a size clearly observable off-world. Guys, the power being used here was just insane, and enough to shake everyone and everything on the planet. Now, as the dust cleared, Vegeta was grounded, and as he got back up, Granola would approach, now doing the same as Vegeta had previously, thanking him for awakening this power from within him. From there, we would have the heaters. Maki would question Oil in regards to what had just happened, as the Lek would now emerge, having made it to the planet at last. He would express his surprise as he expected Granola to lose a fight far sooner, but even still, the battle was still undecided. But either way, they were wearing one another down just as planned. And while this was going on, the Heaters were using the Dragon Radar and approaching the first of the 2 Dragon Balls on the planet. And that was the chapter. And so with that, please allow me to talk crazy for a bit, because a lot of people seem to lose all sense once the leaks of this chapter dropped. Like with the latest chapter discussion, I acknowledge that Vegeta had a trend of being disrespected in Dragon Ball Z. And to a certain extent, I suppose you could say this about the Dragon Ball Super anime. But specifically, in the case of the Dragon Ball Super manga, which is the content currently being consumed, Vegeta hasn't nearly been disrespected on the same level at all. In fact, he has been continuously progressing in meaningful and even commendable ways. And I understand, he has a new transformation, so we want to see him wipe the floor with his opponent. And fair enough, he did, and for a good while there. And in doing this, in beating Granola down for that long, we can definitively say that for that time, Vegeta was in fact the strongest mortal in Universe 7. But if you are expecting him to just wrap up the arc here in a single chapter, you're not being very realistic or even reasonable. Goku has been our main character forever, and not even he has ever done that. A new transformation or not, Goku has gotten bodied twice in this Granola conflict, and both times had to be bailed out by Vegeta. When he first went Ultra Instinct in the case of both the Sign and Perfected forms in the manga, Jiren beat him both times. In fact, all the way back during his initial Super Saiyan transformation against Frieza on Namek, there was a point in which Frieza powered up enough to give him that work. And if you feel like Vegeta talks a bit too crazy for a man that tends to get bodied in the end, then fair enough, although again, that point about Z compared to Super still stands. But even then, ego is literally part of the name. This is Vegeta. This is something many of us like about the character, but canonically, as expressed by Whis, Goku is the one with the overconfidence issue, as it tends to end up being his downfall, as seen with the Moro arc, which despite his Ultra Instinct form, he gave Moro the chance to power up and get the better of him, defeating him before he got help from everyone else. And at that, if we compare the two instances, the most notable difference would have to be the fact that Vegeta, despite currently being on the ground, has not been taken out of his Ultra Ego transformation. I mean, come on, out of the 45 pages that comprise this chapter, he has been down, not incapacitated mind you, but on the ground for one single page. And so for as much as fans may want to see Vegeta pull up with a new form and just end every threat before him, although that would be satisfying for longtime fans who have seen the man struggle like no other, in the self-contained sense, this would be thematically pretty weak and serve to do away with all other plot points yet to be explored with this arc. But regardless, if nothing else, the takeaway to be had here is not to give in to leaks so heavily. Any story without context is pretty much bound to be trash. But objectively speaking, this chapter was pretty epic and I enjoyed it a whole lot. This fight against Granola is not over yet, and with the Heaters only just approaching the first Dragon Ball, they are unlikely to intervene for a good while, so I am very excited and I hope you are too. If you're coming straight from the Dragon Ball Super anime or just want to familiarize yourself with its contents, as it can be pretty different at times, go ahead and use our RightStuf affiliate link in the description below to get your hands on the entire Dragon Ball Super manga series. If you'd like to be here for our further coverage of everything Dragon Ball Super related, please be sure to subscribe to Plot Armor with notifications on, because when it comes to bringing you some of the best Dragon Ball Super content on the platform, Plot Armor has you covered. As always, I'm SliceofOtaku. Thank you all so much for watching and have an awesome day. I love you.